We're joined from Capitol Hill by Senator Mike Braun, Republican of Indiana. And you'll remember that he was the one who introduced Judge Amy Coney Barrett at the start of her confirmation hearings. Thanks for your time, Senator. We do appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Do you have a sense of a current timetable of a confirmation should it happen for the judge?
So I think it's pretty well mechanical at this point, and we knew that here a few weeks ago. We're going to have the committee vote this week, and I think maybe as early as next Monday, I think that vote will come to the floor. Procedurally, if we stay disciplined, I think it should all stay on track. And I think from the tone of what we've seen in the hearings itself, that it was kind of litigated in a much different way than the Kavanaugh hearings. And I think most of the opposition was about what might happen to policies that are important to them should Amy be voted in as a Supreme Court justice. So I think the process is pretty well baked in. So I'm hoping, at least from my point of view, given the outstanding qualities of the candidate herself, that we don't see any drama similar to what we saw a couple years ago.
I was going to ask you that you said it looks like it's on track. What potentially could take it off track in your mind?
It's some obscure procedural things that would have to maybe even involve a lapse on our end. So I think it's very remote that occurs. Don't rule it out. I think every attempt, including throwing the kitchen sink at it, will be made, but those options aren't many. So I think that as long as we stay steadfast, we should see a fairly predictable outcome.
Clearly, you've heard the criticisms of the judge from members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Overall, what did you think of those critiques?
I think that it's about as mild as you can find in this day and age, where literally I do view us kind of as the Hatfields and McCoys. Sadly, I've only been here a little under 2 years, but policy-wise, that's true. And when you do have one side of the aisle that is maybe comfortable with activism at the judicial level, it all makes sense of why the nomination is so important to both sides. But I think that when you look at her intellectual capabilities, her judicial merit, where her values are rooted, it makes it a very difficult case for them to talk about herself. That's why you have to kind of change it into what she might do in terms of ruling, and possibly taking the court to a place where it won't be as difficult to maybe have some things happen from a more conservative, originalist, textualist point of view happen on the court. That has not been the case, not only recently, but over decades.
When you hear then of criticisms by some that her presence on the court would lead to a dismantling of the ACA or a dismantling of Roe v. Wade, what perspective do you offer when you hear those criticisms?
Well, for me, I came here primarily focused on trying to reform health care. I think that's sensationalist in the fact that almost every Republican believes in covering pre-existing conditions. I was disappointed when I covered pre-existing conditions, no caps on coverage, in my own business 12 years ago. That ship has sailed. And I think when you spin things politically in a way, it is kind of disingenuous because it's not the case. But on the other hand, we as Republicans were slow-footed not to embrace fixing the number one issue that besets both businesses and individuals, and that's the dysfunction in our healthcare system. So, but I do believe when you make the case that she is going to be the determining factor that would derail what they're interested in politically, that's just not true.
One of those other arguments or criticisms from Democrats particularly was the closeness to the presidential race. What do you think about that argument? And if this were switched to the other side as a hypothetical, would you accept that?
I think you just mentioned what explains why, how and why we're doing it. If these same conditions were in place and the Democrats controlled the presidency and the Senate, it would be done at the same dispatch, if not more quickly. So I think there's a bit of hypocrisy there. I think that is part of the ultimate result of elections. I think that's why it's so important what's going to happen here in 2 weeks. But I think that's mostly a faux argument as well. That doesn't mean that whoever is against whoever is in there or the candidate that they would not like to see get put into place. You're going to see it. It's part of the process, part of the game. But I don't think it's an effective argument.
Senator Mike Braun joining us, Republican of Indiana. And while we've got you, Senator, what is the likelihood that some type of a second or another coronavirus relief package is going to pass on Capitol Hill?
I think it'd be a great likelihood if we did what needs to be done, and that is focus on the particular parts of the economy that are still struggling, get rid of the extraneous things that are in the Pelosi HEROES Act and what they're potentially negotiating currently with the White House. It would be a slam dunk. 53 Republicans voted for repurposing some of the money that wasn't spent, addressing the individuals that are still out of a job, the businesses that are still hurting, take the other extraneous stuff off the table. We're going to probably vote on that again. It was 53 Republicans for it a few weeks ago, all Democrats against it in the Senate. I don't think there's any chance that a broad cross-section of Republicans would vote for what's currently being discussed between Pelosi and the White House. It still may make it through because there might be 13 Republicans that would go for it. It just would not get the breadth of our conference behind it. We could get something done targeted and focused, something we can afford, and we could do that quickly.
We got about a minute. As far as then what's being floated by the Senate Majority Leader, scope out a little bit of what that involves and why you would support it or maybe not support it.
I think you can go back to what we voted on 2-3 weeks ago. It's going to be basically the same. It'll be for the PPP to be extended for the small businesses that were left out in the cold. It would address some of the individuals that are still, hurting because they've lost their jobs through no fault of their own. It would be focused on COVID-related issues, not a broad kind of grab bag of other political wish list items that Pelosi's got in her package. So I think it's what we can afford. It would help those most in need. In many places, if you did not take the approach of blanket shutdowns, one size fits all, the economies are bouncing back robustly. In my own home county in Indiana, unemployment is down into the mid-4s. As a state, it's way under the national average, and we're already under now in national unemployment than we were through a long duration back in 2008 and 9 through that recovery. So the economy is strong. We need to let it unleash itself, respective, and pay attention to the disease itself.
Senator Braun, we appreciate your time.
You're very welcome.